Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everyone. So last week's episode, Bill, nobody really noticed that we taped it over the course of 3 days, piecing it together, multiple technological crashes, and at one point your shirt changed, and nobody really picked up on it. I didn't want to tell. I thought it was my idea that we don't tell them to see if anybody noticed. But I don't think anybody noticed.
That was an epic battle. Our wisdom is so important to share with the world that we persevered through a litany of technological obstacles for your benefit. So I hope people appreciate what we do for society.
I think we probably. I don't think I'm exaggerating to say we spent 3 hours taping a 45-minute show. Does that sound about right to you?
That is about right.
And I have no idea,
worth every minute.
Well, I have no idea what was left on the cutting room floor and or what was redundant. Things that I kept that I probably said 2 different times over the span of 3 days. Anyway, hoping it doesn't.
I got to talk to you 3 days in a row. It's the highlight of my week.
It was. I feel like, and the other thing is, I feel like we just talked yesterday because we did so many tapings of this last week. The funny thing is, in between, the reason it worked that people didn't notice. Is that so I think we taped Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And Wednesday and Friday are the 2 that ended up being pieced together, were taped at my house. The Thursday episode was taped here in my office, where I am now. And that whole thing didn't work. The entire episode is now lost to history. I do want to say one of our commenters recommended that I listen to a dialogue with John Ziegler talking about David Foster Wallace and about his Mediaite piece. And wow, I did. I went back and I listened to that. Great Blogging Heads episode. Really enjoyed it. So thanks for that recommendation.
All right. Well, let's get to business here. So since we last talked, my life has been very action-packed since we last talked. We talked previously about the piece I wrote about how Sanders could avoid creating a Nader-like scenario in the fall, which a lot of Bernie supporters got mad at me about, saying I'm blaming Sanders for Hillary's weaknesses, and I shouldn't have blamed Nader for Al Gore's weaknesses, all that stuff. So then I did a piece for Politico. Because we had Marcos at Daily Kos take a very pointed shot at Sanders, saying that all the hostility of the race is stemming from him. Josh Marshall at Talking Points Memo said the same thing, saying that some people think he's being goaded by Jeff Weaver as campaign manager, but what I'm hearing is that Bernie himself, is the driver of the current hostile tone. You had Kevin Drum at Mother Jones.
Are these guys
saying they never?
Are these guys now establishment? Is that I don't know how it works on the left.
Well, let me get there. And Kevin Drum, Mother Jones said he never really took to Bernie Sanders, that he was running a con, that he knows that the revolution's not going to happen. So this is all very strong language coming from them. And a lot of this is coming out of what happened with Nevada, and some people say that Bernie didn't condemn the angry texts and voicemails harassing, death threats and such that came out from the aftermath of that. So I lay all this out, but I say in the piece, none of these guys were ever Bernie supporters. At best they were neutral or Hillary leaners, or in the case of Kevin Drum, he kind of came out as as anti-Bernie. But there's still a change in their tone towards Bernie. People were not this angry at Bernie at the beginning. In the beginning, it was, hooray, Bernie's not mentioning her emails. He's running such a high-minded campaign. This is such a lovely little conversation we're having. And I think it was, even though Hillary was throwing her elbows, it was tough for her to do that. Sometimes those things backfire because Bernie was kind of a Bambi. And if you're mean to him, it kind of showed desperation or weakness on your part. And now it's all, no holds barred. And so I think that's a relevant dynamic to observe and assess the impact of. I think that it is problematic for Bernie to have these people treat him in such a negative way, because he's trying to exert influence at the convention. And while he has a lot of delegates, he doesn't have all the delegates. He needs to be able to woo the party establishment at the end of the day. It's good to have leverage. It's good to be able to say, look, if you don't move in my direction, my people are going to walk. You want to have that in your back pocket, but you can't only use sticks and not carrots. So if you're being seen as the toxic factor, they might not want to play ball with you. So I mean, he has things to lose. If he doesn't want to be seen as the reason that Trump got elected and have his legacy be known as that. So I think there's leverage on both sides here.
But it's hard to I guess I have a point and a question. So like the point is, I think it's hard to demonize Bernie because he just seems so damn cuddly, and harmless. He seems very harmless.
Well, I think that's less and less true right now.
Well, you say he's losing his halo. I say we're just getting
that was the title of the piece.
I say we're just becoming friends.
Bernie loses halo. And so all the Bernie supporters in my Twitter feed were just livid that was the headline. And that I'm creating this false narrative, and I'm using all of these anti-Bernie pundits to make this case. And I kept saying in response, I said that in the piece. I'm not saying that he's lost his base.
I'm sensing a
That's
theme.
not the point
I'm
of the
sensing
piece.
a theme emerging with you and your writing, Bill. It's a common lament that people don't read the piece. That people don't. That people like look at the headline and complain. I want to ask you about the Marcos Melitsas of the world.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm seeing this through a conservative prism.
Yeah.
But it seems like to me, I remember when these guys were like the Howard Dean insurgent, radical leftist types who had all of the credibility amongst progressives. Is this a sign that Bernie hasn't consolidated support, or is this a sign that like everybody becomes the establishment eventually? Like even yesterday's revolutionaries or today's ruling class or something.
Well, as you know, man, I'm a grizzled blogosphere veteran.
This used to be the weekend blog, for crying out loud.
That's right. My blog, Liberal Oasis, and Daily Co's, and Atrios's Eschaton, all these things came out around the same time in the spring of 2002. I was in the very early
when I started
wave
blogging. I started blogging in 2003, 2004, and it used to be like Michelle.
Wow, 2003, 2004. Your second wave. 2002 was first wave.
Well, back then there was there was NZ Bear. And Captain's Quarters.
One of our fans.
Yeah, Rob. And Captain's Quarters was Ed Morrissey, Michelle Malkin. You had Hugh Hewitt was pretty, and then obviously Eric Erickson and Red State. And the bloggers used to matter more. That's why we don't even do the weekend blog anymore. Don't you think they used to matter more?
Well, I mean, I think, so much has shifted to Facebook and Twitter. That's not, hopping from blog to blog. But I do think their online commentary still, can pack a punch.
Sure.
I mean, certainly there's a lot of pro-Bernie media, online media from people who you never even heard of before, who came up because they were putting out pro-Bernie analysis that really kept his followers juiced. I mean, it just kind of shows how it's just a constantly evolving platform. But to go back to Marcos, Marcos is sort of an interesting. I don't know if he is representative of everybody here, but his own trajectory, I think, is very important. In 2002, I would say he was representative of the early liberal blogosphere in that it was not ideologically pure. The ethos of that first wave of liberal blogging was that Democrats don't know how to fight Republicans anymore. it wasn't about purity tests. It was about showing Democrats that you had to, fight fire with fire. Play smash mouth politics. Stop going on the Sunday TV shows and trying to sound conciliatory. There was and so going beyond 2002, when you get into those 2006 races, and Coase was a leader in this, getting behind Jim Webb in Virginia and John Tester in Montana. These were guys who were not liberals down the line.
Yeah, but you could certainly argue then that was a pragmatic thing, that he would have preferred somebody.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, there was an ethos that we want to recruit people who can win in their states.
But that was before. But that was before Obama. That was before.
Yes,
gay marriage.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and
exactly
so now
right.
you could argue that you have a longer leash to go further to the left than back
now. But in 2006, so Tester and Webb were of a prototype that liberal bloggers were looking for, and Howard Dean's part of this, fighters.
Yeah,
Dean was not a liberal down the line either, but he fought on the war, and he fought Democrats who weren't willing to stand up to Bush, and that's what people liked. But also in 2006 you have the Joe Lieberman Senate race. And so Lieberman was someone who was seen, not merely on the conservative edge of the Democratic Party, but too supine to the Republicans. And so Coase also a leader here.
Nice word. Nice pull there. I like that word.
Thank you.
You don't hear that every day.
They get behind Ned Lamont. They beat Lieberman in the Democratic primary. And then Lieberman jumps to run as an independent and wins as an independent, and then becomes an even worse conservative after that. So from my personal perspective, that was a net loss race. Lieberman was a better senator for Democrats before 2006 than after. I mean, after he endorsed McCain over Obama. But Coase never regretted that. Coase said, we got rid of a Democrat who was hurting Democrats. And so that was sort of the beginning of a shift towards more ideological purity that I think got accelerated in the Obama years after Obama started to disappoint elements of the left. Coase has had plenty of criticism of Obama for not being as partisan as he would want him to be. Now you get to this race, and Coase has kind of gone back to the partisan Coase and the less ideological Coase, and saying, look, Bernie's had back in March, before March 15th, he issued a missive on Daily Kos saying, if Hillary has a strong March 15th primary day, the race is effectively over. This site pivots to general election footing, and I will ban any malicious attacks on Hillary. Not saying you can't be for Bernie, not saying you can't have constructive criticism, but he drew this somewhat arbitrary line. If it's malicious, if you're recycling right-wing talking points, he erases it from the website. And a lot of Bernie people were very mad at Marcos about that. So I do think you are seeing the blogosphere is not so much as a discrete community as it was in 2004 and 2006. But I do think you are seeing voices like that who want to close ranks behind Hillary, even if they thought Bernie had a positive contribution. You're not seeing that same level of ideological purity test being leveled on her the way some on the left, some on the left still do, and some were doing to Obama in that first term of his presidency.
Well, I just don't understand why. It strikes me that this would, if you have Donald Trump, apparently has now got enough delegates, according to somebody on Twitter. But in any event, as the presumptive nominee, Bernie, polls better against him. Hillary's not a good candidate. She's got this email stuff hanging. Well, wouldn't this be the time to take a shot at the end zone? Let's go with like a socialist. Let's go with our guy. Like, when is there going to be a better time than now to actually like pull out all the stops and go all Bernie on everybody?
there's a lot of people on the left who are like that. I mean, it's the reason why the race has been as close as it is. It is largely generational. There's much more appetite for that kind of ideological absolutism amongst younger voters and older voters. And early blogosphere are people my age, mid 40s, and that age cohort nationally amongst Democrats is a bit of a swing cohort, between Hillary and Bernie. But as far as bloggers of that era, early blogging, if you go pre-blog into the 90s, where Media Whores Online was a big liberal website, and Bart Cop was a big liberal website. These were folks who got into the online political sphere as Clinton defenders, as pointing out how the media is biased against Clinton. And so much of early blogging is trying to teach establishment Democrats that the media game is rigged, and no matter how nice you try to sound, they'll stab you in the back anyway. You learn the lesson of how the media treated Whitewater and Monica Lewinsky and Travelgate and Filegate and all that stuff. It's always going to be, no matter how nice you play, they'll always be mean to you. And so I think that is kicking in now that you see, email stuff and Hillary's voice is shrill and all that kind of business, that blogosphere anti-media sentiment is coming into play, and the just win baby is coming back into play. Clintons were winners. They want to get behind a winner. They want to stop Trump. They want to stop Republicans. And the ideological specifics become less paramount, again, with that corner of the online left.
Interesting stuff happening. And I feel like this is, we've now had a few weeks where the what's happening on the left is probably more interesting than what's happening on the Republican side. I mean, obviously, the AP is now reporting that Trump has 1237 or whatever. I guess they found some delegates somewhere. I don't know how that happened, but
maybe some Unbound said something. Who knows?
Maybe, I don't know. Something's up. Maybe Bernie's recanvassing turned up some votes that we didn't know about for Trump. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, really. And Bill, you've been on top of this, man, with these Politico magazine pieces, especially, and stirring up that piece about Bernie's halo. That's a piece that I saw like all over the place. I didn't even know it was you. I just saw it was like going viral.
Well, the headline was actually Twitter trending, which is something that hasn't happened to me before. And we like to talk about, how do pieces get traction. But here's a case of a piece where, and I can see this in my Twitter feed I can follow whoever tweets at the link, even if they don't mention my name. Pro-Hillary people were pushing it to say, yeah, screw Bernie. He's lost his halo. He never had a halo. I hate that guy. And the pro-Bernie people were saying, God, Bill Scher, Politico, the media narratives, this is so horrible. And almost nobody was actually reading to the end where I say, here's what Bernie should do now. So he lessens the backlash against within the party. He could give a speech where, Bernie always says that whenever he's asked about anti-Hillary stuff, he always says, you in the media, you like all this conflict, you like all this sport, you don't want to focus on the big issues about poverty and Wall Street and global warming. He is now inadvertently or verdantly feeding the media beast because he's giving them what they want to write about, conflict, and they're not writing about the issues. So he could give a speech where he says to his supporters, the media is at it again. The media is trying to make this about a personality contest. We're going to stay on the big issues. We're going to win this by focusing on what matters to the middle class and the working people and the poor. And we're not going to give the media what they want. So my conclusion was not, Bernie go away. It was, here's how Bernie could get back on track. But the headline is such that, no one gets there. Everyone wants to use the headline for their political purposes.
Well, look, I do want to say with the media, obviously the media has a liberal bias. I don't think that could be seriously in dispute. But there's also a profit motive bias, which I think is a bigger, well, equally big problem, and that bias is toward controversy and salaciousness, and anything that if it bleeds, it leads, ratings, clicks, and I think that that's to that degree, Democrats are like Whitewater. Well, Whitewater is a bad example because that's kind of actually boring. But Bill Clinton's, some of his other scandals were certainly sexy in the sense of being salacious, in the sense of being something that would get clicks and ratings if clicks exist.
Well, I mean, I assume. I mean, I don't. When Politico asked me to write a story, I don't know why they asked me. They give me a topic and say, "Do I have something interesting to say about it?" But I can only assume I'm being asked to write a lot about the Democratic friction because people are interested in reading about Democratic friction, and the pieces are getting read.
Well, the keyword is friction. I mean, it's friction, baby. I mean, it's not a story if everybody's getting along. It's not a story unless they want to oust Debbie Wasserman Schultz or something. I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz doing a great job as DNC chairman might have been a story in the Hill 20 years ago or something, but it's not going to get a Drudge link. Let's be honest.
Right. But I'm getting yelled at for offering clickbait. And I mean, to my mind, clickbait is something with no nutritional value.
Right. I agree.
There's,
we're all showmen. Look, we all are this is a business, and we are we all, to a certain degree, have to, it's edutainment. But what I really reject is there's a line like the poison is in the dose. I mean, it's when it's just stuff that's complete fluff, or just like, I would say it really comes down to motive. Like, what is your motive? I mean, like, the number one motive should be to write an interesting and true story that enlightens people, and then after you've done that, let's come up with a way to sell it, to market it, and so it's just sort of reverse engreening it that way. I think that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly. You gotta do it, or you don't have a job.
I mean, that's people don't grasp. I mean, if I write something and the headline doesn't make you want to click the link, then you don't read the piece, and no one sees what I say. So I think there's a difference between clickbait and read bait. Right. I'm trying to do something so you actually read the piece and to the conclusion and think about what I have to say. You don't have to agree with it. You might disagree with it, but I need to do something. So in the daily fire hose of letters that blast through your internet every single day, you pluck mine out and actually read it.
That's a great. I think that's a great way of putting it. Actually, I never heard that before, but that distinction is really important and true.
But I particularly amongst Bernie supporters, I find there is this great obsession with media narratives. And I think you saw, there's this guy Seth Abramson who blogs at Huffington Post, who's super pro Bernie, and wrote lots of pieces like, Bernie's really winning, and Bernie's winning the diverse states like Hawaii and Washington. Don't say he only has white voters. And it was often mocked for being kind of the Baghdad Bob of the Bernie movement. And he had a piece in Huffington Post the other day, sort of talking about his belief in meta narrative and how we shouldn't be slaves to the corporate narrative, and not that what it said wasn't true, just that there was value in creating this alternate meta narrative to fight against the corporate meta narrative, and so there's people the whole time have said Bernie hasn't gotten a fair shake. The media didn't give him equal treatment. He was always treated as if he wasn't a serious candidate, and there's a selective. There's blinders there because the Hillary narrative from the beginning is that she's corrupt and distrustful and hides her emails. So it's not like she had this sweet ride the whole time. But anything that seems to not fit in with their Bernie meta narrative is treated as in and of itself deliberately damaging to him. And so my headlines don't fit their narrative, and therefore everything written beyond that is irrelevant because I have now created bad narrative. And what I respond to them, and we said this last week, is that you're very focused on this headline narrative, but you've won a lot of states despite that. So clearly, you're not taking into account there's this whole other level of media and information flow going on that is not just what Politico says, what the New York Times says, or what CNN says. And you have the ability to, I mean, to Seth Abramson's credit, you have the ability to create your own narratives and say your own information and rally your voters. So all I'm doing is I'm not even trying to dictate an outcome here. I'm trying to get you to think about stuff.
Yeah.
And you can think about however you like. You have free will to think about my information. I'm going to give you information that can maybe challenge your narrative, but use it how you will.
The other interesting thing, Bill, as someone who's a writer and interested in the dark arts of trying to get things read and paid attention to, you were telling me we were having our one of our pre-podcast interviews, our pre-dialogue interviews, which were quite extensive. You were telling me that you wrote it in like a half hour, and I think it's so interesting. There are things that I write that I don't think are very good, and they just pop. And then there are things that I put a lot of time and energy into that just go nowhere, and nobody cares. And I think, look, there's so many factors. There's the headline, there's the timing, and then there's maybe just some magic. Like one person sees it and tweets it, and then it catches on. But I don't know. I just always find that fascinating. How like sometimes it's the pieces that you don't put as much time into that end up being really big successes.
Yeah, that was. Politico asked me to do it on a Friday. I had a window of time to get it done. I've been thinking about. It just so happened I've been thinking a bit about what Marcos and Josh Marshall have been saying. So I wasn't totally start from scratch with that, but I wasn't planning to write about it until I was asked. And so I managed to come up with. And they even pushed me out. Like at the end, they were like, maybe you give them some advice at the end of what to do. And then I came up with something to say there, and had the Halo, metaphor that worked out. But that's just also a little serendipitous when you're kind of under the gun because they asked him to do it quick. Like I only got a couple hours to get this done. Boom, there you go. But we only got a few more minutes left before I have to jump.
I was hoping to run out the clock.
But I want to ask you about this proposed Trump-Bernie debate.
Okay.
Which I don't know if it's going to have but Trump said on Jimmy Kimmel that he would like to do it, and then Sanders jumped on Twitter saying, absolutely, let's do it. My gut reaction, I said this on Twitter, that the cost benefit's not there for Bernie to do this. Sure, if he wins the debate, what does he get? He's still not going to get the nomination. He wants to win California, obviously, and if he won California, I think he'd have a very aggressive convention. And so maybe you could argue that beating Trump in debate would help you win California. That's the best I could say for it. But what could also happen is he could get destroyed by Trump. Trump could just mercilessly skewer him in a way that we haven't seen Bernie been confronted in this whole race, which would undercut this notion that he'd be impervious to attack in a general election, based on what the current polls seem to suggest. Or Trump and Bernie could gang up on Hillary, which would make Democrats furious that he's helping Trump attack Hillary for the general. And I don't see how that helps him at the convention in trying to win platform planks and such, or even could hurt him in California, that Democrats might get angry with him and turn out against him in California. So like, we got to cut this off before this goes out of hand. So I just don't get, I'm coming from a place where I feel like Bernie is in as good a position as he's going to get short of winning, and he's not going to win. He's going to have 45% of the delegates. He's got cards to play at the convention. He can win platform planks. He can be a player inside the party far greater than he would have had previously. There's not that much more to gain from this point forward. Obviously, if you think he's still in it to win it, you're going to try to grab any kind of opening you can find to get an edge. But I think that's being blind to the political reality and taking risks you don't need to take.
Yeah. So this came about, Trump was on Jimmy Fallon's show?
Jimmy Kimmel,
one of the Jimmys. By the way, let me just say this. I don't like Jimmy. Jimmy Kimmel looks too good now. he's like thin, and he's got like a beard.
Shiny.
He looks like he wants to be like a movie star. He used to be a little pudgy, and I think fun. Like I think that's
you
funny.
remember from the Man Show with Adam Carolla, I bet.
Well, I love the funny thing is I love Adam Carolla, but I don't like the Man Show. Never liked the Man Show. If you want to see something, there's Adam Carolla did a very, very good movie, wildly underrated movie called The Hammer that everyone should go see. You can get it on iTunes or something, but really good movie. But no, when Ben Stein's Money is, I guess, where we first fell in love with a young Jimmy Kimmel. And I don't like the new Jimmy Kimmel. But anyway, Trump was on Jimmy Kimmel last night, and I guess did it come up? I guess it came up as a joke, or I don't know, but like apparently now it might actually happen. I'm trying to think through like what could happen. I think two things. One, Trump obviously is a good debater in terms of like bluster and mocking people, but Sanders is going to be a much more eloquent defender of his socialist philosophy than Trump would be of capitalism. So in a way, I don't like the match. If it's the more substantive it is, the more it concerns me. Like I would not pick if this is like what was that tennis match where you had like the woman beat the man, Billie Jean King
and Bobby Riggs.
Yeah. So like I want to set like if we're going to send up our sort of representative of capitalism, I want to send somebody else in there. Like I don't want Trump to be our representative of that against Bernie. So like that bothers me.
Well, I mean, you have this problem for the next 6 months. It's not just 1 week with Bernie. He's your guy now.
Weekend with Bernie. The other thing is, I think it's possible it helps Hillary in the sense that, so at first blush, you would think that it hurts Hillary. She's like sort of being left out of this news story. But I think that it probably makes it less likely that, so let's say that they get into this debate and Trump attacks Bernie, then there was already a long shot that Bernie supporters were going to flip and support Trump. Bernie, that the Bernie guys would either stay home against Hillary or flip and support Trump. Like, doesn't this make that even less likely if they get into it on stage?
Well, that's why what I find so strange about Trump's approach now. I mean, I wrote a piece why Bernie supporters wouldn't vote for Trump. There's a great historian, Josh Zietz, who wrote a quasi-rebuttal to me in Politico magazine, which people should read. There's some actually really great history there about 68 and 1980. So it's a well-argued piece that he did. And his point is that, if you're anti-establishment, you might jump ideologies in the general election. My point was not that Bernie people would necessarily stick with Hillary. It's some of them might gravitate to Gary Johnson or Jill Stein before they would go to Trump because that distance is too great. But if you're Trump, you certainly need Bernie supporters. And the only reason why he's ahead in that ABC Washington Post poll, or the only reputable poll where he's up by 2, is because he's getting more Bernie support in that poll than he's losing from his Republican base. So it shows, I mean, if he was to win, that is the demographic model he needs to replicate. He's out there almost every day talking about crazy Bernie and goofy Elizabeth and Pocahontas. That is if he can win those voters by doing that for 6 months, then he is truly a magician. I mean, that just makes absolutely no sense in any way, shape, or form. So if he's going to go crazy Bernie in front of Bernie, I mean, to the extent that maybe they'd be flirting with Trump, I mean, you think that would be a wake-up call saying, there's no way I'm voting for that. Maybe I'll go Jill Stein, maybe I'll go Gary Johnson, but I'm not going to vote for a guy who's trashing my guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. And I think this is a weird move. And I don't think it happens. I mean, I think it's just something Trump said. We'll see if it happens, but I don't think it makes a ton of strategic sense unless there's something I'm not seeing here, and who knows how it'll shake out. But maybe more risk than reward if you're Trump. doing this.
Let me ask you one thing. We got to go soon, I'm giving you an ambush question. We didn't talk about it beforehand. What do you make of these?
Have sexual relations with that woman? Go ahead.
What do you think about all these stories about Trump's inner circle being a disaster? That Paul Manafort and Corey Leonowski hate each other, and their camps hate each other, and Trump fired his political director this week, Rick Wiley. Yeah. I mean, does that stuff matter? Does it matter that he doesn't have a functioning campaign apparatus? He was already way behind in building infrastructure. He's way behind in a fundraising apparatus. Now he doesn't even have a loyal team under him. Even the super PACs are yelling at each other. Roger Stone has a super PAC who hates the Ed Rollins pro-Trump super PAC. It seems like this is all just internecine warfare. I wonder if Trump is, Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, was known for deliberately sowing discord amongst his underlings in hopes of getting them to compete against each other and try to one-up each other. I mean, is Trump depraved in that way, trying to do that, or is he just not paying attention to the store and that's going to hurt him? Or do you think it doesn't even matter what's under him because it's all just based on his personality and all these other normal factors are just trivialities now?
I think the latter. You're right. There are leaders and business people who like to sow acrimony and disunity, and I think it's a toxic and pernicious and horrible thing to do, and I think it's counterproductive. And I think, thankfully, I don't work at a place like that. But I don't think that's what Trump is intentionally doing here, sort of pitting, rivals against each other. But I do think it's worked out that way. But I don't think it matters. I think it's baked in the cake. Look, no one's ever expected Trump to have the best, campaign team, the best turnout operation, the best ground game, the most, that's not what he does. And he doesn't care. And, that's not what he's going to win or lose by. And, and he might lose. But he could lose this election.
Was good for.
We could lose this election because of it. I mean, if it's close, he could lose it because he doesn't have the best turnout operation in a swing state or something.
I mean, that was good. His, all personality, all the time model was good for 10 million plus votes in the primary, 41% of the total. I mean, he still lost 16 million votes. You get Trump out there saying he has a record number of votes. Yes, and a record number of votes against him for a nominee. So congratulations.
I just think
he needs 65.
Well, the problem is, for some reason, these things seem to be mutually exclusive, right? So, it's really hard to find the guy who is off the cuff and charismatic and authentic, and who also runs a really well-run, orchestrated, detailed campaign. And
that's what Barack Obama did, right?
Well, those guys are few and far between. It's rare to find. Usually you have one or the other. It seems to me. I mean, for whatever reason, I don't know why they're necessarily mutually exclusive, because it seems like you could have a sort of a front man who is like that, and then you could have a campaign manager who's empowered to run a tight ship. But it just, for whatever reason, that's a difficult combination to get both things.
I just seems like if you would need to win, he won 10 million votes. He needs 65 million votes in a general. Even if you think he has a shot of winning, I don't think anyone thinks he's going to win by a landslide. He's going to have to gut it out. He's got to climb a massive demographic mountain, and so every last vote's going to count for him. You better believe you need to get out the vote operation if you're winning by a hair. I mean, that's when you need a good machinery. And so it just seems like he's not in a great place to do what he needs to do.
We'll see how it works out in November.
All right. Well, I got to jump.
All right.
Good to talk to you, sir.
Good talking to you. Check us out. The light just went out. Check us out at DMZ Show on Twitter, and back here next week. Thanks, everyone, and happy Memorial Day to all. See ya.
Until then,
You
take care.
See ya.